If you want to support me, check out my Patreon at https://www.patreon.com/Kaioshin. I tend to polls that decide important plot stuff in my P at Trian. Many thanks to my awesome patrons. Ben Phillips.
Chapter 220 to 222. Babidi. Open the door. Broly yelled as he brutally kicked the door of Babidi's spaceship. Pum. What? What has that been? What's going on? Shouted Babidi, who was startled by that unexpected war cry and explosion in his ship. I think that someone quite powerful has broken into the spaceship. Great Babidi, said Dubra, who quite accurately intuited what happened. That's true. Is the Kaioshin who so long ago killed my father and humans? Babidi said as he projected into his crystal ball how Broly, Shin, and the others entered his spaceship hidden underground. Although some don't seem too human, Dubra said, pointing Piccolo and Broly, who were the most unusual of all for this world apart from the Kais. Good observation, Dubra. That coward has surely asked for your help to locate me, stop me from reviving Bu and kill me later. Just like he did with my father. Babidi said, showing the great hatred he felt for Shin. It seems that his father is the only being for whom he feels any affection. True, great Babidi. However, some of them appear to have wonderful energy, perfect for Majin Buu's revival, Dubra said, to improve the mood of his dear dwarf master. A news that filled with joy the evil brother of ET. Really? Perfect then, I guess my hated Kaioshin has made things easier for us. Now that you have entered the spaceship, it will be very easy to absorb their energy. I never thought that reviving Majin Buu would be so easy. Hua 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 hua. Babidi and Dubra laughed in a cliché way at the same time to celebrate their impending evil victory. In Dragon Ball they didn't laugh this way, but here they do. At that moment a few floors above, our heroes, the Kais, and Vegeta descended the vertical corridor of the spaceship while discussing things that were somewhat absurd. Broly-sensei Dano-sama. I don't think it's a good idea to just walk in here. Kibito said, who for some reason was against using force in a preventive assassination mission. Stop calling me that, I'm not your fucking teacher and I'm not going to be. Only Gohan can call me in that way. But why? I have warned them that I was going to enter and I have repaired the door, answered Broly, who believed that Kibito's complaints were related to the lack of protocol. And while Kibito gave up in his attempt to explain why what they had done wasn't the most correct, at least from his point of view, they all arrived to a well-lit circular room. What's this? We? Sure is a tidy room, Goku said, surprised by how they had decorated this spaceship, since it didn't look anything like the spaceships he had used until now. There's a door overt there. Why don't we try breaking through it? Or directly we destroy the entire spaceship. Vegeta said, which was quite practical and decisive when he wanted, but also destructive. You must not. A strong enough shock could awaken Majin Buu. We can't be so rough. Shouted Shin, who as always was the party pooper of the group. One moment. Your plan was to let them steal our energy and then follow them to their base, let them keep the energy and not enter their base until they let us through while they are reviving Majin Buu with the energy they stole from us? Gohan asked, that if he had understood fairly well. Shin's plan was a fucking shit destined for absolute failure. No. This. Okay. If you put it like this. Shin replied, that after hearing his plan from someone else's mouth, he had no choice but to admit with shame that his plan was absurd. I'm starting to lose respect for the Supreme God, Piccolo thought, who expected a lot more from his Supreme Chief. Either way, it will be better look for that Babidi. I'll cut the ground carefully. I guess that magician will be lower down, Gohan said as he created with his ki a kind of torch with which he was precisely cutting the floor of the spaceship. A tactic that would allow them to easily reach the final boss level without having to fight and without causing sudden movements in the spaceship that could wake Bu. However, Gohan's sensible plan was interrupted, as almost always in this manga someone happened to do something mildly intelligent. Welcome, this is the first stage. Babidi-sama is on the very bottom floor. However, unless you pass through the various stages, and defeat of the warriors that come out, you cannot proceed downward. And your opponent for the first stage is me. Which means you guys are finished here, said the half-random lackey who appeared in the first room. However, what Gohan was doing seemed more interesting. Fuck. Finally someone had a good idea. It wasn't something that was seen every day, however an evil alien, arrogant and destined to die, yes. Oh, it is true. Cutting the ground we can get down easily, although a lot has to be cut, Shin said, marveling at how efficient these mortals were with barely a few decades of life. They were far better than a god who had lived for millions of years in almost every aspect. Something that didn't say much in your favor. Eehee. Bastards. What do you think you are doing with the spaceship of the great Babidi? Yelled the useless lackey upon see that they were ignoring him and that they were vandalizing his master's property. On the lower floors. Ah. These bastards are damaging my spaceship. And what is worse, if they get here it will spoil my plan. I have to fight back with magic. Baba Bidi screamed as he prepared to magically teleport the entire room of the spaceship. Wow, they aren't as idiots as we thought, Dabra said quite surprised. For the first time Shin had hired competent people. One more time with our heroes, Shin, Kibito and Vegeta. What? What happened? Where are we? Krillin shouted somewhat altered but this unexpected change of events and landscape. This is the work of Babidi. He has changed the room with his magic, probably to someplace that benefits his fighter. And of course prevent us from digging, said Shin, who seemed to know Babidi too well, and despite that it was impossible for him to hunt him down before. A shame. I had a feeling that I had little left to get to the next floor, Gohan said, very annoyed to know that he had been working for nothing. Hey! Stop ignoring me! They yelled lackey again. And finally they listened to him, although if he had known, he would have preferred not to stand out. Everyone except for the two useless ones wanted to fight. They wanted to trash monsters. They wanted to warm up before the tournament and this low-cut alien seemed like the ideal punching bag, especially for a certain person named Krillin, finally an extremely easy opponent with which to regain my confidence. After the operation I have become extremely powerful, more than I ever dreamed of. So much so that I was able to beat Goku and Vegeta during our training years ago. But due to Broly's multiplication Saiyan technique things haven't been easy lately. But now. Hee. Krillin's intention was evident, volunteering to fight the first, well. If we have to fight then I think. However. Leave it to me. Someone claimed that match. What? Something that surprised everyone. The surprising thing wasn't that someone wanted to be the first to fight in a group of warmongers who took fighting as a way of life, profession and fun. Rather, it was the most expected. But what they didn't expect was that a certain person would volunteer right now. You, Broly. The reasons for this surprise were more than obvious, so much that even Gohan had to highlight it. Are you sure, Broly-sensei? This guy looks like a loser that any of us can beat. Why do you take this trouble? I thought that you would only help against Majin Buu if it was 100% necessary. Gohan. There are several reasons for this. The first is that since I have become a father I have accumulated a lot of stress that I need to launch against someone. And the second is to teach you another lesson, dear student. Broly said in a badass manner as he advanced with his hands in his pockets towards the ignorant alien lackey who was looking at him arrogantly. Another lesson? Asked Gohan, who believed that they had already finished the lessons when he learned antithesis and the perfect Saiyan multiplication skill. That's right. I want to teach you that even when a lion hunts a rabbit, he does it with all his power. Broly replied as he took off his shirt and stored it in his formless realm so as not to break it with what was about to do. What? Almost everyone shouted at having a little deja vu that forever marked their lives. A deja vu in which... Broly unleashed a lot of his outsized power, transforming into true legendary Super Saiyan full power. And the world that Babidi teleported them to began to shake. Broom. 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 What the hell is that monster? Yelled the footman that could barely keep his footing as he began to think that coming here hadn't been a good idea. Like Broly's companions, who felt that they should never have let him fight. Oh no. It's that transformation. Krillin shouted, that despite having become much more powerful than before, he still felt totally defenseless in the face of that abominable torrent of energy. Wait. It's different, there's something else. Piccolo shouted, who sensed that something was changing in Broly. Something that was making him even more abominable, cool and powerful. His hair. Vegeta yelled upon see that. Broly's hair was growing exponentially to the point that there was more hair than Broly, which by now he and his muscles had reached the size of a titan. This is true legendary Super Saiyan full power beyond. Broly yelled as he increased his power and the size of his hair even more. Crack. 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 Broom. To the point where the very planet Babibi had teleported them to and the space around it began to collapse. That's why I didn't want you to come. This is the end. Shin cried out through tears while holding Gohan's leg as if he were a panda scared by an earthquake. Meanwhile, in Babidi's control room. What? What the hell is that? What is happening? What are you guys with that kind of power doing on Earth? Babidi screamed, seeing the absurd and intimidating power of Broly, who was destroying a planet only releasing some of his power. Indeed. 300 years ago, when we investigated here, there weren't any guys like these. But I've never seen anything like that. Who the hell is the guy with the third eye? Dubra said, who was even more incredulous than Babidi when he roughly understood Broly's power level. Where did that monster come from? And why had he come to screw our day? This was horrible, almost catastrophic. Dubra. Don't tell me this guy is stronger than you. Babidi asked, seeing the grim and worrying expression of the powerful, calm, calculating and efficient Dubra. I don't know for sure, great Babidi. But he's certainly a great threat. Dubra replied, not wanting to panic or belittle herself by admitting that Broly was a great danger. Something that Dubra said quite subtly, but that Babibi understood very well. Shin had brought competent people with him on this mission and his life could be in serious danger just like his father was millions of years ago, and this completely despaired of Babidi, damn it. If only Majin Buu was awake. Eee. However, something suddenly gratified him. What's wrong, great Babidi? Dubra shouted, seeing the change of expression of his master, the dwarf and ugly. Majin Buu. His sphere. I cannot believe it. It seems to have absorbed residual energy from that guy and all the other he hurt. And it's at full power. Babidi shouted with great euphoria as he saw that the sphere in which Buu was locked up gave off smoke as if it were a kettle burning at maximum capacity. Nanny! Shouted Dubra, who didn't understand how this had happened. I don't know how it could happen, but Majin Buu is finally being revived. Babidi replied, who was too happy with the result to bother with the method. Excellent. No matter how strong that guy is, he will be no match for Majin Buu, said Dubra, who was infected by Babidi's optimism and stopped asking questions. The invincible Majin Buu would be revived shortly, and those guys, no matter how strong they are, they will die. Hua 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 hua. The two villains laughed in an evil way. One more time in Babidi's spaceship. Our friends had returned from their brief trip to another distant planet, defeating a rather weak enemy. Broly-san. I think you have exaggerated a lot. Krillin said with good judgment. Exaggerated? I haven't even touched him. Besides, certain collateral damage is impossible to avoid in a high-level battle, answered Broly, who wasn't making a triumphant pose due to his great achievement, something excessive as he used to do. Collateral damage? You destroyed a fucking planet to defeat a weak lackey, said Kibito, who of course saw problems. Yes, but I have restored it later, nothing has happened, said Broly, who used his ability to turn back time a few minutes in a certain area. You have done it by manipulating time. That is illegal and you know it. Shouted Shin and Kibito at the same time. It is only illegal if you create alternate timelines, but this is not the case. So I'm clean. Broly wins, the gods lose, as usual, Broly replied, leaving the two idiots speechless. Damn, said Shin and Kibito, who were left without arguments with which to accuse him of the same crime as decades ago. Other than that, Majin Buu will be revived in no time. Apparently I am so powerful and I have so much energy that even with absorbing a little of my residual energy it has been possible to revive it. Broly answered, somewhat annoyed. He was happy to announce that he was extremely powerful, but that had also caused an inconvenience. Wait. So it's your fault he's going to resurrect? Shouted Shin, that felt he was on the verge of having a nervous breakdown. And Broly, to reassure him and the rest, but above all to excuse himself, he said, maybe. But this brings us to the other great lesson that I wanted to teach. Sometimes you have to dose your power to avoid. That's the contrary of what you said before. Everyone shouted in unison without giving him time to finish his poor excuse. Please, Broly-sama, please take things seriously. I beg you. Shouted Shin, who even knelt in front of Broly begging him to solve the mess that he had created. Okay. I'll teleport us to where Babidi is. So sorry. I just wanted to feel young again. Sorry for wanting to enjoy being alive a little bit," said Broly, somewhat angry with himself and with all creation, seeing that his good intentions hadn't been well received by his friends, acquaintances, Vegeta, and the reality itself. In the control room of Babbidi's spaceship, more people joined the resurrection party. "You see, we have arrived," said Broly, who arrived with his entire troop in front of Dubra, Babidi, and a spherical kettle made of rather gloomy meat. "What? How did you arrive here?" shouted Babidi, who didn't understand how they could have arrived. They hadn't passed the other 2 levels and he hadn't given them permission to get here. "A magician did it." "Hee hee." Broly replied with a reference that only he understood. "Is that Babidi?" "He looks quite imposing," Goku said, pointing to Dubra, who really looked like the final boss in that place. "No. Goku, didn't you hear me before? Babidi is the short one, he's Dubra." Shin yelled, pointing at Dubra, a great evil with which he didn't count in this mission. "Who?" asked Piccolo, who had never heard of him. And obviously Shin started to reply, "He is." However, Broly interrupted him to remind him that they were going against the clock. If the explanation is long, better avoid it. "You suck summarizing." "Okay. He is a very very strong guy, very evil, with special abilities, and he seems to be under the control of Babidi for being very evil," Shin said, trying to be as brief and simple as possible in his explanation. "Well, you've improved." Broly congratulated Shin for having improved in such a short time. He had finally done something right. Although it was somewhat pathetic. Unfortunately, that little distraction due to the existence of Dubra was fatal for our heroes, since at that time Babidi was able to perform his resurrection ritual. "I don't know how you got here. But that doesn't matter. I didn't plan it in this way, but this is even better. Kaioshin, I'm so happy you came. Now I can finally have my revenge. You will watch with horror as Majin Buu emerges from his shell and slaughters all the terrestrial ones that you have brought with you. To finally tear you apart." Hua! 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 The large sphere of flesh in which Buu was supposedly enclosed began to throb as if it were a heart. The steam or smoke that it gave off was more and more numerous and thick, and above all the noise was more sinister. Like the energy that poured from within. "Let's run away!" shouted Shin, who was starting to panic at the thought of being once again in front of that monster. The monster that killed his superior and his 3 other friends and co-workers. He panicked from the trauma of that day. "Shut up, fucking coward," Vegeta said, already tired of that weak and useless god. "You don't understand. It is not a question of strength. Majin Buu is invincible," Shin yelled agog as Kibito tried to reassure him upon see that he was having an anxiety attack. "Don't worry, we have someone invincible among us," Gohan said, pointing to Broly, who blushed a bit. But that didn't reassure Shin at all. He saw what Buu was capable of. He was even able to defeat people more powerful than him and become more powerful after devouring him. It didn't matter what they said to him, he couldn't be calm, and therefore he had to express it. "You say that because you don't know what he is capable of. Even with Broly here. Oh god. If that monster devours him, it will be the..." However, too late, useless gods. "The bug is about to come out of the egg," said Broly, pointing to the egg, which hatched completely, filling the entire room with a smoke screen that made it impossible to see what was happening. "Come Buu. Kill them. Avenge your creator." "Hua hua hua," shouted Babidi with a crazy voice as he danced with joy for having managed to claim the most powerful weapon of his family. "No. It's the end," Shin yelled as he collapsed physically and mentally. "Our time has come, guys," said Goku, who indicated to all his friends to get into a fighting position. The time had come, and this time they will save the world together. "Ha ha ha ha. You poor fools, you won't be able to do anything," Babidi shouted with more euphoria than before. This was the beginning of the end of his great plan. Babidi had managed to gather the necessary energy to free the terrifying monster Buu from his sphere, and Shin and Kibito had pooped in his pants. How will be this terrifying and abominable monster that nearly destroyed the universe millions of years ago? Can our brave heroes stop this terrifying threat? Is it really the end? Gohan will succeed in conquering Videl. Will Bra manage to collect Mr. Satan's 10 million and pull down Vegeta's junior pants? What does Broly think of this strange friendship between these two? All that and much more in the next and last chapter of this volume. Don't miss it. In a dark room of Babidi's ship, in the middle of a thick smoke screen, Everything was happening at dramatic speed, to create even more tension. Come Bu. Kill them. Avenge your creator. Hua hua hua. Shouted Babidi with a crazy voice as he danced with joy for having managed to claim the most powerful weapon of his family. No. It's the end. Shin yelled as he collapsed physically and mentally. Our time has come, guys, said Goku, who indicated to all his friends to get into a fighting position. The time had come, and this time they will save the world together. Ha 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 ha. You poor fools, you won't be able to do anything, Babidi shouted with more euphoria than before. This was the beginning of the end of his great plan. The plan to take over all the universe. And that plan started with Bu's awakening. An ancient being whose sole mission was to destroy all existence, and which our heroes and villains began to glimpse as the smokescreen dissipated. His appearance was something out of this world, although hardly identifiable with something like the supposed terrible monster that everyone was talking about, but still it was something that his imagination would never have been able to emulate. Everyone was petrified watching those small round eyes, and small rounded gray ears, of that short and small, with a rather large oval-shaped head and sky-blue skin, except for 2 sections from his ears to the middle of each eye on both sides of his head, which are purple. Where I am? What is this place? Said that unknown being with a childish voice as he looked around in bewilderment. No one had ever seen anything like him, the same with that strange magenta and yellow lined coat and black and white shirt underneath, with the kanji 4 on the front that little being was wearing. No one except WWHWJWJTTTTTTTTTTTTTT. Shin and Kibito shouted with their mouths wide open and their eyes about to come out of their sockets as they though that were about to die dehydrated due to the torrent of cold sweat that was running through their bodies incessantly. That being, the one in front of him, was someone they knew too well. Someone extremely fearsome. That being is... No. It's not possible. Ze. Zen. Zeno-sama. What is happening? Shin said as he looked terrified at the imposing god at all without blinking or making any kind of movement, just like Kibito. Although, their voices could barely be heard in that closed and practically silent room. Due to the initial terror of coming face to face with Majin Buu along with the subsequent surprise and even greater terror of meeting without any kind of logic with the destroyer of universes. Shin and Kibito were on the verge of a psychotic and heart attack. Such was their shock that their throats suddenly became dry, so much so that it was difficult for them to even breathe, preventing them from speaking correctly. Hey! Is that the monster? Goku said, puzzled and disappointed as he pointed to that blue dwarf with a deformed head, just like everyone. And when I say all is all... Babidi-sama, is that Majin Buu? Dubra asked, that like almost everyone, he could not believe that this ridiculous-looking being was the fearsome monster that destroyed galaxies with a flick of his hand. Not sure. I've never seen him before. Kaioshin's the only one here who's ever actually seen him, said Babidi, who like his lackey also had serious doubts, but luckily he knew how to contrast this information. Shin. Kibito. Is that Majin Buu? Gohan asked on behalf of everyone. However, Shin was unable to answer correctly. It was as if he was not listening to them, or rather, as if his body and mind were completely blocked. Oh. That's impossible. Shin stammered as he tried to kneel before his royalty. However, it was being impossible, his legs were completely paralyzed due to the shock. It seems that they are terrified. Seems to be Majin Buu, after all. Babidi said excitedly upon seeing Shin's expression. He was totally scared to death. There was no doubt, that being despite his appearance was the fearsome Majin Buu. Him. Everyone said, pointing to the suspected Buu, who still could not believe that he was that abominable being. Hey there, Majin Buu. Babidi shouted with great enthusiasm as he got dangerously close to his new subject. Although that Buu didn't recognize him at all. Who are you? Who are you talking to? Zeno asked Babidi as he looked around him looking for that supposed Majin Buu, but he didn't see anyone else behind him. Who the hell was he talking to? To him? HaHaHa. Oh. No. Babidi. Don't say anything else. Shin and Kibito yelled inward as they fell further into despair upon see that Babidi could provoke the wrath of the childish destroyer of the universes and realities. However, their words could barely get out of their mind and mouth, they were too scared and shocked to vocalize properly. I am Babidi, the child of Bibidi, who created you. I've revived you after you were sealed up in your ball for an incredibly long time. And so, starting today, I will be your master. Babidi said, proclaiming himself the owner of Zeno, the supreme being who was above all. An incredibly irritable and bipolar supreme being. What the hell are you saying? You are very annoying, Zeno said, showing great hostility towards Babidi. How could he not be? Few seconds ago, he was quietly playing marbles with planets in his house when suddenly appeared in this ugly place, and suddenly an even uglier bug said that he was his property. He was very angry. No. Babidi. Please. Shin and Kibito stammered, completely pale, as if the blood on their bodies was drying. They would both be crying and sweating profusely, but there was no more water in their bodies. Despite being gods with a very long life expectancy, they felt that they were losing thousands of years of life in this small interval of time. Babidi-sama, with all due respect, it seems that the resurrection ritual was a failure. It's impossible for someone who looks like this to be the fearsome Majin Buu, Dabra said, belittling Zeno out loud, so that he could hear him perfectly. You're right, it looks like a retarded baby with a head malformation, said Broly, totally agreeing with Zeno's stupid appearance. Some appreciations that completely melted the already battered mental resistances of the two poor Kaioshin, that were about to faint between screams, Stupids. Do you have an idea of who you have just disrespected? He's Zeno-sama. A being that can erase universes with a simple flick of his hand. Buu in comparison is a fucking bitch. An insignificant being. How you dare to bother him in any way? That and many more things were what Shin and Kibito wanted to tell everyone, however they did not have time to do that. I don't like this place, I don't like you. I don't like this universe. Zeno said, very angry. Immediately afterwards he flew and spread his arms, and suddenly a bluish light shone from the palm of his hands. It seemed as if he was aiming to perform an energy attack, but it was very different. Hey! What's he doing? All mortals asked, as they were unable to feel ki in Zeno's hands or body. They had no idea what he was doing, but the gods knew it perfectly, and this was precisely what they had feared so much. No. This can't be happening. It's not possible. We are going to. I am the worst Kaioshin ever. And possibly it was true, his incompetence had caused Babidi to find Buu's ball, and somehow, although he still had no idea how, that summoned Zeno-sama. Due to shock that caused their state of mental derangement, they were unable to warn others or try to mediate with Zeno. And his negligence caused the Supreme Being to use his ability to destroy entire timelines. As soon as the light from Zeno's hands goes out, all the universes on this timeline will disappear. All because of him. Now the only thing Kibito could do was watch helplessly, through tears and on his knees, while the apocalypse broke out on his face. Guys. I am sorry. I am so sorry. Pluff. Unless, that the end of all the universes of this timeline meant that Zeno's head was opened and that from inside a camera with a very powerful flash emerged, portraying everyone's faces at that moment. What? This, for reasons more than obvious, was something that nobody expected, much less Kibito and Shin. Everyone was confused, stunned, and two of them were even on the verge of having a psychotic and heart attack. Everyone except HaHaHa. 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 Oh. Broly-sensei. Gohan asked, confused upon see that Broly was lying on the ground, writhing on himself, crying and laughing as if he had seen the funniest thing ever. So much that he seemed to have lost control of his body and emotions. Palm. Ha 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 ha. 30 years. 30 years waiting for this moment. And every fucking second has been worth. Look at your face. Ha 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 ha. Said Broly while between tears of laughter hitting the ground again and again, not only with his fists, also with his head after seeing the newly printed photo of the desperate and resigned faces of the two Kais. Causing little earthquakes with every hysterical hit. What the heck was this situation? Those who knew Broly and his crazy troll behavior more or less began to understand that this was all his fault. However, those who did not know him, like Babidi. What the? Isn't that Majin Buu? Asked Babidi, who was still trying to process everything. Not. I beat Majin Buu decades ago. However, I predicted that something like this could happen, so I used the empty shell to stuff a robot of someone Kawishin fears above all else. And... Wahahahahahaha. So funny. Wawawawa. I'm dying. Despite being immortal. Shouted Broly, who was practically dying of laughter. He was laughing so much and so hard that even his abdomen began to ache. The first time in a long time that he felt pain, and it was caused by his own joke. Kibito and Shin stammered, incredulous and dismayed to hear that shocking and outrageous revelation as they tried to recover unsuccessfully from the previous shock. Was that all a fucking prank? Waiting. Majin Buu. I remember now. So that blow to the head a few minutes ago in the tournament was to make me forget what happened more than 30 years ago? Did you make me lose my memory so I wouldn't remember anything about the joke you played on me with Majin Buu? And to prevent me from trashing this new joke too? Piccolo/Kami asked, who remembered everything that happened to him in the third volume, since Broly's amnesic blow had lost its effect. Yes. Ha 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 ha. I'm the best. Wah 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 wah. Sh. Eh. Wah. Ha 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 ha. Broly replied, trying unsuccessfully to stop laughing like crazy while pointing at the catatonic Shin. But it was impossible, he had waited a long time for this moment and his execution had been incredible. The best joke of his life. Ah. I see. No wonder he was so participatory. Krillin thought, that from the beginning it seemed strange to him that Broly was so participative and that his participation had caused an alleged accident. What the hell is wrong with you? I almost died of a heart attack. In fact. I don't feel well. Everything is spinning. I think that. Shin yelled as he began to lose consciousness and felt like his heart was about to explode. Everything he had experienced in these few seconds had been too much for his lazy and useless godly body. PLAF. Shin. Kibito. Are you okay? Piccolo said, concerned about the health of his former bosses, who had fainted and did not look very good. Ha 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 ha. AIH. Auhu. Ha 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 ha. Something that didn't make Broly feel guilty at all, he even laughed louder. I don't quite understand what happened, but I think Broly has crossed the line again with his jokes directed at gods, the others thought with indignation after being used in a mean and somewhat useless way to play a prank on someone. Although deep down some were relieved to know that they would not have to worry about another dangerous monster invading the earth again. Although of course not everyone was relieved. It cannot be. It is impossible that you have defeated Majin Buu. He is invincible, Babidi said, totally desperate. He could not believe that what Broly said was true. But, then where is Buu? What's happening? Don't worry, Babidi-sama. I'm still here. With my power and your magic, those guys are nothing. We don't need Majin Buu, Dubra said. He did not lose confidence in himself. He still had his ace up his sleeve. His petrifying saliva. Pwaj. No matter how strange and powerful Broly was, if he's hit by his saliva he would turn into stone. Buff. However, a simple breath from Broly brought about the inevitable. The saliva changed direction. You're so stupid that you spit against the wind, said Broly as he saw how Dubra was hit by his own spit in the face and turned into stone. Oh! Dubra! Babidi screamed as he saw that he had run out of competent lackeys to protect him. But Broly didn't have time to listen some disgusting cockroach cries. Shut up for once. I'm in a hurry. You are detained for illegal immigration, Broly said as he engulfed Dubra, Babidi and his spaceship in his formless realm, thus ending with all the villains. Wow. So it's all over. Jio Gohan disappointed and relieved at the same time. He didn't really know how to feel. That seems like. Vegeta said, that unlike Gohan, he knew exactly how he felt. Extremely disappointed. Like his rival Goku, it's a shame. I would have liked to fight with those guys and with Majin Buu. Well. Maybe I can let you fight the other day. But now I better take you to the martial arts tournament. You still have time to participate. And... Ha ha ha. I also better take those two to a good cardiologist. Ha 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 ha. So fucking funny. Broly replied as he telekinesisized Kibito and Shin and teleported them all back to Papaya Island. After that little episode of Babidi everything went well. Well. Relatively. Since the two lackeys of Babidi exploded when he died, so they exploded in very gore way in front of the audience. Luckily, Mr. Satan was there, who was asked what had happened, and Mr. Satan, against the opinions of any doctor, thought that this had been caused by an excess of steroids. Therefore, he reminded the entire audience that in order to be strong one had to train hard and not rely on drugs, something quite true, but unrelated to what had happened. So the tournament was not cancelled, oddly enough. Videl fought in his first round against Mr. Satan, easily defeating him thanks to his superior talent and Gohan's training, thus ending his father's charade. Goku and Vegeta fought each other in the first round as well, with Goku's victory, since Vegeta will always be inferior to him no matter what happens, something sad, but that's a fact. Mutant Rashi and Ginger had their much-dreamed revenge, which ended with another public scandal of the quirky couple, which deserved their disqualification, expulsion from the tournament for life, almost the loss of custody of their daughter, who looked at them with shame, but they won the affection of the public with zero or low morale. Krillin fought his wife C-18, who emotionally blackmailed him, lowering his guard at the last minute and falling off the stage, losing the fight even though he was technically stronger. Yam and Gohan had their rematch once again, in which Gohan won even more easily, but without cursing his opponent, Vegeta couple eliminated in the first round. And as for Piccolo, he was forced to fight Kaioshin, which was also forced to participate by Broly, with the humiliating defeat of the Supreme God at the hands of a former local god, who apologized thousands of times later with his punching bag. In the end, Gohan was the absolute winner of the tournament, with Goku being the second and Piccolo the third, thus leaving everything in the family. And even though Gohan had to fight Videl in previous rounds, since Broly broke his promise to Gohan to help him flirt, defeating her in a somewhat condescending and didactic way, she ended up falling completely in love with him after the fight, thus fulfilling another family tradition. And an even deeper and more extended tradition, that every Saiyan man ends up married to a woman from a wealthy family, not Vegeta in this timeline. Well, maybe not so rich, now. Hello Mr. Satan. I hope you have not forgotten what we agreed. Because that would not be good. For you I mean, said Bra, who intercepted Mr. Satan before he fled from the tournament to remind him that he had to give her something. But. You see, me, now. I don't. Mumbled Mr. Satan as he tried to contain the urge to cry. How could Mr. Satan forget this pact with the devil, ironic? Of course he remembered. The point is that he thought that he would win the tournament and therefore receive the money to pay this demonic girl who floated in front of his face while cracking her knuckles. However, he lost, something that made it difficult for him to pay his debts. And what is more? He was no longer a world champion, he no longer had a reputation to maintain, therefore he cared less that people found out that an evil kindergarten girl defeated him. A deal is a deal. Or do you want me to scream and cry? Dad says I'm a very good actress. The story of a former champion who abuses children can be very lucrative. And if that doesn't work, I can always use a less artistic method. Bra said, showing that despite being 6 years old, she could destroy a man with more than her fist. Waiting. I will give it to you. Just wait a minute, I'm going to get the money. Shouted Mr. Satan, that at this point he was willing to do anything to get rid of that monster. Even if that meant his ruin, as a world champion and showman, he was able to amass a great fortune during these years, although less than in the original version because he could not kill Cell, you know what I mean. Go, don't worry, but remember. I'm watching you, Bra said to warn him not to try to escape while she teleported next to him, showing that she could follow him to the end of the world if necessary to collect the money. And a few meters from there, hidden in the undergrowth. I am so proud of her. If only she would stop following Vegeta's son everywhere. Broly said as he wiped a tear of pride from his 3 eyes and worried about his daughter's strange fixation. Broly, Bra. It's getting late, we have to go, the grandparents are waiting for us at home, said Bulma, who remembered her husband and daughter that they had family commitments to attend. Among other things, celebrate with the family the great triumph of Bra. Wait a minute Bulma, Bra has to say goodbye to a friend. Let's give her some time, said Broly, who walked away from the scene with Bulma so that she would not realize that his Bra was doing something quite shady. And obviously he did it with a big smile and in the most romantic way that he could while they held hands. Something that did not go unnoticed by Bulma, who asked him, what's happening darling? I see you very happy. Of course, how can I not be? Bra has won, she has learned how business works. My student has also been the winner and has managed to hook up with a good girl. I've gotten together with my best friends after so many months. I've seen live semi-porn. Vegeta has lost in his first match. I have played the best joke of my life, and I'll go home with the two most beautiful girls in the universe, Broly replied with a wide smile of satisfaction as he looked Bulma in the eyes. As if he was trying to look through her soul. Ha 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 ha. AH. What's the matter with you today? You're very weird, more than normal, Bulma asked with a wide laugh. She was used to Broly's compliments and romantic phrases, however today he was even more mellow. Is nothing. I was just thinking how incredibly lucky I am. I don't know, until relatively recently I was a weird, lonely, megalomaniac child, without family, friends, and without a place to belong, who was only obsessed with power, knowledge and having fun in a banal way. Fun, power and knowledge that I acquired, but that I did not share with anyone. But now, I am so strong and intelligent that I have to restrain myself in an almost infinite way so as not to make everything extremely boring. I have good enough friends to support me, I care and I try to praise other people besides myself. And above all I am incredibly lucky to have in my life the most wonderful woman in all the universes and a daughter just as thug as me, whom I love so madly, with whom to return home after spending a beautiful day together. I guess I can't ask much more of life, Broly replied in a melancholic way as he romantically hugged his beloved Bulma, lifting her off the ground so that they could continue to look into each other's eyes. Oh, come on. Don't be silly, besides you're still the biggest megalomaniac I know. Bulma replied with a laugh, returning the hug to her husband and correcting some of his appreciations. I'm serious. The years that I have been with you, together with everyone, have been the best years of my entire life, like a dream come true. Something that I would not change for anything in this world or another, said Broly romantically, ending the sentence with a passionate kiss. And after a few minutes, right after the kiss, Bulma replied, and you're also very romantic, more than normal. But before Bulma could go on the attack, as in any marriage the children interrupted these good moments. Dad! Save this for me, please, said Bra, who rushed towards the back of his father and gave him an envelope large enough for you to keep. Of course darling. Has he fulfilled his part of the deal? Broly asked as he gently laid Bulma down to carry her other treasure on his back. Of course. He had no other option, as you have taught me, said Bra very proud and happy for his first great business success. That's my girl. Broly shouted very proud as he stroked her head and hid the envelope in his pocket. What that? Bulma asked, curious to know the contents of that envelope and the conversation that her two thugs were having. Nothing mom. Is nothing. Nothing sweetheart. Is nothing. Bra and Broly answered at the same time very effusively. Something that didn't convince Bulma, I have a feeling that you have done something. Something not very good. Anyway. What's for dinner tonight? However, she didn't feel like arguing or finding fault with what those two did. Today had been a very nice day and she didn't want to spoil it for some random stupidity. Pizza of everything you want to put. Broly replied effusively as he showed a holographic image of what his clone was preparing at home. Yees. My favorite. Shouted Bra, who believed to have lived today one of the best days of her life, just like her father. Desire Realm. In the usual movie theater of the Broly planet, at a private party. Many of Broly's lackeys ate pizza of whatever you want to put on while they watched Broly having a fairly normal and perfect family life. Until the questions arose. You really can't ask for more from this life? I would swear you still want so much more. Aizen asked, who believed he had heard countless times that Broly's goals were quite different. Much higher than their own and almost any other. It is possible, although for me now that is just an administrative step that sooner or later I will carry out. It's strange, when I didn't even fully understand the infinity the more I was obsessed with it, but now that I'm almost touching it I care much more about the smallest, simplest and most earthly numbers. What exactly happens to me? Perhaps it is part of the natural instinct of every living being not to exceed the limits of what is pre-established in its own biology or mind, as if it were a kind of resistance that, in case of breaking, will try to reset that organism towards more mundane objectives according to its initial biology. Or, my priorities only changed over the years. Broly said, psychoanalyzing himself and wondering the reason behind his mental changes. Does that mean you cancel the plan? You promised me absolute prosperity for America once you were successful. Said one of the group of newcomers, who were being received with this succulent party full of pizza mozzarella. No. Of course not, the plan continues. I have become a model father who values his family above all else, but that is not incompatible with the plan. Don't worry, funny Valentine, I am not a politician like you. A deal is a deal and my plans never fail or are half ruined. Not like those of Dio or Pucci, Broly said to the best US president in history while pointing out part of the cast of JoJo's villains, specifically the best couple in the show. I did not fail. Not at all. Pucci replied, remembering with bitterness how he lost after achieving the divine power to destroy the fucking universe and recreate it at will. Whatever you say, but a child beat you. Don't worry Valentine, you will be well rewarded even though you killed Yuro. One of the reasons why I chose your JoJo universe and you specifically is your stand. If not, I would have been forced to choose the Katekyo Hitman Reborn universe too, and that would have prevented me from beating Yugi or traumatizing Rito, Broly replied once more as he ate another slice of pizza. Don't worry, he promised me a perfect and immortal body and look, I already have it. He will fulfill his part of the deal, Orochimaru/Cell said, showing the newcomer his perfect genetically modified bug body, something he loved. Anyway, these are being the best and longest vacations of my life and the previous one. And the best thing is that I still have a few months left that I can enjoy before I start working again. After that another vacation. And then. He. It will be legendary, as always, Broly answered, ending the conversation while he put Frankfurt, York ham, cheese, mozzarella, minced meat and pineapple to a pizza. At that very moment. At the Origin Realm. In office of the laziest movie producer in the Omniverse, the fourth job interview of that day was taking place. An interview to find his substitute and temporary assistant that his boss, Broly, advised him to carry out. And for some reason this girl gave him very good feelings. Hello Miss Bromley, is a pleasure to meet you, said Avalon, who got up from his chair to greet the interviewee. Although for some very particular reason he was not looking into her eyes. Rather, it was impossible. No matter how high the universe was, it was practically impossible for a heterosexual man to look up from that pair of melons, especially when that pair of melons belonged to a beautiful and lush redhead that seemed to have been sculpted by the gods of art. No, the pleasure is mine, Mr. Avalon. I am a great admirer of your work and it would be a great honor to be your assistant, said Miss Bromley in a very effusive and suggestive way, returning the greeting to Avalo. However, instead of shaking hands like the Anglo-Saxons, she gave him 2 kisses like the Hispanics. Something that made the boring filmmaker very happy. Ha. Thank you very much, miss, but I warn you, this can be very hard work. Are you sure you have what it takes to replace me after my retirement? Avalon asked in a very pedantic way, trying to score points of alpha male in front of Miss Bromley. As if he believed he had a chance of flirting with that goddess. I am sure that if I work for the best I will be able to follow in his footsteps and hopefully make him feel proud of my work. You just have to tell me what to do and you will have it, Miss Bromley replied suggestively as she adopted a posture that further pronounced her already exuberant gutter, which Avalon couldn't take his eye off. Excellent, Miss Bromley, I look forward to your help next month. Although if it were up to me you would start right now, Avalon replied, who was hoping that Bromley would say goodbye in the same way she had introduced herself. And why not, maybe in a spicier way, never lose hope. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Mr. Avalon. I will do my best to make this movie legendary. Miss Bromley replied in a rather particular and unique way.
If you want to support me, check out my Patreon at https://www.patreon.com/Kaioshin. I tend to polls that decide important plot stuff in my P at Trian. Many thanks to my awesome patrons. Ben Phillips.
If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.